Sherry, if you have a moment, if you want to put up the starting slide, thank you. There we go. Thank you. As we're waiting for our 2:00 hour to start, I just thought we'd share a few facts about our featured community of Ansley today. One of our presenters is someone who enjoys history, so nodding to Ansley, sharing a little bit of facts about Ansley that I was able to discover. So feel free to familiarize yourself with that history as we're waiting for 2:00. Lynette, are you with us? Do I see you?
I am here, Lori.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to do a sound check with you.
And I'm the only one in the office. I'm really hoping we don't have too many interruptions. I will.
Okay.
I might just have to take the phone off the hook, right?
There's always a way.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. We will be starting here shortly. So
okay. Righty.
Well, let me just welcome you. It is 2:00 and we've got a lot of great information to share with you today. So let me just welcome all of you to a snowy February but sunshiny day, and welcome to our HomeNE webinar. Thank you for joining us. The South Central Economic Development District seeks to serve as the lead agents for HomeNE. It was designed to be a resource for people all across Nebraska who seek to successfully address local housing challenges. And I surprised Sharon a little bit yesterday, asking her where she was 5 years ago yesterday. And if you've been with HomeNE for quite some time, yesterday was the 5th 5-year anniversary, for HomeNE. We launched with our very first webinar back on February 15th of 2018, talking about transforming distressed properties. So we've enjoyed it, and we hope that it will continue to be that resource that all people look forward to joining and taking stories back to their communities and to their people about how housing is being done across the state. So today we have the pleasure of hearing from Lynette Doan, who is the village clerk of Ansley, and Lance Bristol, who is one of the founding members of the Ansley Investment Group. If you've participated in HomeNE before, you might remember that in August of 2020, we heard from Brian Beaumont and Dave Larson, who were also founding members of the Ansley Investment Group. They shared how the investment group got its beginning and talked about the completion of the very first home. So things have progressed in Ansley since that webinar 2.5 years ago, and we wanted to kind of make a return trip to hear from Lynette and Lance about what's been happening since that time. So lots of good things, both in terms of housing and community development as a result of the investment group's activities. So let me just take a moment and introduce you to our guest speakers today. So Sherry, if you would go back, please. Thank you. Lynette was born and raised in Ansley. She is a graduate of the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. In 1981, she started as deputy clerk for the village. And upon the passing of the longtime clerk before her, she was appointed clerk treasurer and has been in that position ever since. So she has served just a total of just over 42 years as deputy clerk and village clerk. And I'm sure she would be the first one to say that during that time, much has changed. She has held all the offices in her area clerks association, has served for over 8 years on the education committee for the Nebraska Municipal Clerks Association, and is currently serving as president for LARM. And we may have to have her tell me what that stands for, and also sits on the legislative committee for small communities through the League of Nebraska Municipalities. In 2022, Lynette was named as the Nebraska Municipal Clerks 2022 Village Clerk of the Year. And my understanding, Lynette, is that the second time that you received that award and distinction?
That is, yes, you're right.
Okay, congratulations to you on that. So,
Thank you.
and like Lynette, Lance was also born and raised in Ansley. He is a UNL graduate as well, with a bachelor's degree in music education. And his graduation from college launched him into an amazing 45-year teaching career. For 24 of those 45 years, he served as the middle and high school choral director for Broken Bow Public Schools, and also became principal of Ansley Public Schools for 14 years. And he is serving as the music teacher in Ansley for this current school year. So during our practice session today, he had spent the morning with first graders through eighth graders. So we want to show him some grace and kindness during this time. So community service is important to Lance, having served on various community boards, including the Ansley Planning Commission, the Custer County Tourism Visitors Council, the History Nebraska Board of Trustees, and the Custer County Historical Society. He has strong interest in family, local, county, and state history. His Ansley roots run deep with with his grandparents first homesteading there in 1884. Both his grandparents and parents were members of the Ansley business community and built their lives around service to the community. He said he became one of the founding members of the Ansley Investment Group because it was quite simply time for him to give back to the community that had given him so much. So thank you, Lance, for your service. So as they begin to present and throughout their presentation, feel free to type questions that might come to mind for either one of them in the chat box, and we will be sharing those questions with them at the conclusion of their presentation. So thank you both for being here. And at this time, let's turn it over to Lance and Lynette. But first of all, excuse me, Lance, would you just give us a quick brief history on the village slogan? We have it there on the slide. We kind of incorporated the village slogan into today's title. So could you give us just a brief history about that?
Right. In 1916, where this is actually, to tell you the truth, Lori, I found a postcard the other day that Push Ansley was always called Push Ansley, was always on the end of a coal shed, that when the trains pulled into Ansley from the south, you always saw Push, that's Ansley. Okay, that was there. But my postcard dates back to 1910, so that logo is a little bit older than 1916. But at that period of time, from about 1910 to 1920 on into the early 20s, Ansley was in a major building boom stretch. They had survived the pioneer days, and it was time to get rid of all those old frame buildings on Main Street. So that's when the brick buildings went up on Main Street, old businesses that had been moved in from two communities close to Ansley. So Ansley was going because they had two barber shops, they had 3 banks, there were many there were like 3 different local grocery stores / hardware stores. They had 2 doctors, they had a jewelry store, a bakery, a large Woodman Hall. So Ansley was growing. And so there was all this optimism, which led to that. So you can see it there, it's push, and if you can't push, pull, and if you can't pull, get out of the way, because we're a moving town and we're moving into this 20th century, and we're proud of ourselves and what we're accomplishing. So that's where that's the impetus behind that old logo. And I like it because even though some people think I'm like crazy stuck in the 1900s or the 1800s, okay, I like what it says because I believe that has been kind of the big driving force in our investment group. If we push ahead, and if you don't want to push ahead, you can pull ahead. If you want to do that, just get out of our way because we're going to move ahead. We have this
Super.
idea and we're going to move ahead with it. So that's
I
that.
like that. Thank you for telling us a little bit about that. I just wanted to incorporate it into the title of today. So thanks for sharing that historical tidbit. So, okay, now we'll let you guys get started.
Oh, okay. So Lynette will help me with this. So I'll tell you a little bit about our community. We're 450 people. We're an hour directly west on Highway 2 from Grand Island. We're north of Kearney, about 50 miles a little north and a little west of Kearney. It's a great community for a small community. We have a wonderful park. It's the probably only town on Highway 2 between Grand Island and Alliance that has a lake by the highway, so you can see where our park is. We have a really nice a picnic shelter there. We have a new walking trail. We have a brand new playground that just got completed there. Actually, there's two really nice playgrounds at the park. That's where our high school football field is. So the park is very beautiful. We have a swimming pool. We have a wonderful school system. I'm a little prejudiced there, I know, of course, but we just recently added onto that school 6 years ago, which added another additional practice gym, and we reconfigured our lunchroom and added a couple more locker rooms and a weight room. Yeah, so we have a great school system there. We're one of the smallest communities probably that still has its own generating plant, and I know it is kind of a luxury actually for us in Ansley to have, but I don't want to say I speak, but for me, we depend a lot upon REA for our electricity in Ansley, but when REA, which covers a huge, Custer Public Power covers a huge area in central Nebraska, and when we have storms come up, it is nice to know that we won't be without electricity. So if REA goes off, I know they're going to flip the switch in our generating plant, and we're going to stay warm, and I can watch TV. That sounds selfish, but it's all about me. That's what I would say. So, but probably the biggest challenge we had was housing. Okay, it's just a challenge in a small town. Our business district is not as strong as it used to be. We lost our grocery store, which is a bit of a problem, but it is a very good community to raise children in. There's no major crime there. We have a Veterans Memorial. The businesses we have there are very strong. We're very fortunate to have probably, I think, one of the most progressive lumber yards probably left in the state in a town our size. We're very lucky to have the Beaumonts in our community and what they do for our community. We have a brand new fire hall. We have a relatively new community center. So Ansley is really kind of I've become comfortable in considering ourselves a bedroom community.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't used to like that term, but I'm okay with that term now. A bedroom community, we're a good place to come and live as long as the challenge of housing is met. So Lynette, what have I forgotten that we need?
Well, yeah. And if you are familiar at all with, state of Nebraska, housing is a issue everywhere. Everybody's struggling with that. The legislature is trying to provide some incentives for rural workforce housing development. And because if you don't have good housing, you can attract the population, which brings not only tax dollars to your community, but potentially businesses, potentially students for your school. So housing is at the root of the need, to grow your community. Rentals, houses for people to purchase, it's all necessary. And in order to grow, housing is the bottom line. So, and I think that we are very fortunate. I mean, we do operate all of our utilities in Ansley, the city. We do operate our generating plant. We have our water, wastewater. We operate our trash service. We have excellent firemen and EMTs. So we have all those kinds of basic services that are really important that we operate all locally. So, very fortunate to continue to maintain those and continue to improve on them.
So the next question was sort of like, so how did this investments group kind of get started? Well, I have to blame Brian Beaumont for this, okay? Because I hear that he's on now, which is good. And if I could see
Well, you
his
give
face, I
him
would.
credit. You don't blame him. You give him credit.
Oh, I'll give it credit. That's a better way to put that.
There you
Okay.
go.
It started with, I mean, I knew he and his wife were working on this grant from DED to restore one of our buildings on Main Street, and they had worked long and hard on that, and that did not finish very well. So I was in their lumber yard looking at things, and we had this conversation, and so somehow in that conversation he said, so what if we didn't have to depend on anybody else and we just did it on our own? What if we just did something on our own? Well, what do you think? Would that possibly work? And so we just kind of left it. 2 or 3 weeks later, I was in there again. He said, are you serious about this? Are you really serious? And I said, yeah, I think it's time we do something. And which led to a meeting with some other like-minded people. That meeting was with, we had a banker there, I'm pretty, as I recall, who came from, who was actually an alumni of Ansley Schools, who came and talked to us about some things. And quite honestly, I'll tell you, from that first meeting, I didn't go home. I was I was pretty scared actually, because I thought, wow, we could be biting off a lot here, because I really don't know what we're getting into. But then the more I thought about it at home, I thought, if we stay where we are right now, nothing's going to happen. So we're probably going to have to risk a little bit. So if we're willing to risk it, let's go after it. So that's what started the investment group, is this casual conversation, which led into a more serious conversation, which led into talking to this first. There were only 5 people who were originally interested, which has morphed into 10. And how did that happen? Well, one person talks to one person, the other person says, you think that they might be interested? Yes, they probably might be interested. No, I'm not interested. But eventually we ended up with 10 members. Okay, so that's how we started the investment group. And we picked a dollar amount. We picked a dollar amount to start with. So we would have this base amount of money to begin the project with, and everybody agreed to, right from the very beginning, that this was like the money was in, it was to stay in. The purpose was to build homes in Ansley. We were not looking to make a profit. We were not looking to take the money out. It was like, this is what we're going to do in the community to help grow the community. So that's how we got started. If Brian's there, he can chime in too, because I might be getting old and senile and forgot some things. But as I recall it, that's pretty much how we got started, because we saw the need. And Lynette said it earlier. Every place I've been, no matter in what aspect, whether I go to a church meeting or whether I go to an education meeting, the first thing you talk about your community is, what are you missing? Housing. Well, what are you going to do about it? Well, quite honestly, you can wait around until we're more than 10 miles off the interstate. I think I mentioned this to Lori, I don't know, maybe in my conversation with Lori the other day. And I don't know about what the rest of your experiences are, who's even on where you're from or how close you are to the interstate. But I have found out that grants seem to follow the interstate. And if you're too far off the interstate looking for somebody else to come in and help you, you are like blowing at the wind. It's probably not going to happen, especially like where we are. We're way off the interstate. And we're a little dinky town, so if we don't want to bend down and push and pull, there's nobody out there that could care. I hate to say this so bluntly, I don't think there's anybody else there. They may talk about how they care about small town Nebraska, but the truth of the matter is, for those of us who lived in small town Nebraska, the cold, hard reality is you don't see much proof that they do care much. So if you're going to do something, yeah.
So. And I think, Lance, your group also was, I mean, I'm not familiar necessarily with all the fine points, but you established an agreement. And yes. So there were terms, yes. Everything from how you were going to vote, how you were going to add more people to the group, the investment dollars, all that kind of stuff. So they laid a really good groundwork so that everybody coming into the group, everybody that formed the group was a part of the group. The rules and the guidelines were very well laid out. And I think that's really important for any kind of a group. because then everybody knows what's expected, what's required, how it's going to run, so that's important too for anybody else that might be thinking of forming a group like this, is have somebody, an attorney or somebody, help you draw up basically an agreement. I don't know what you guys call it, but it's kind of an operational, your bylaws or whatever you want to call it. That's really important.
Because we are an LLC. That was the suggestion, that's what we went underneath. So, and we did have a lawyer draw up all those agreements. So we took a look at it, fine-tuned it to fit what we thought would work for our group, and it has helped. I mean, it's become very necessary. It's a document that we depend upon. That's how we do businesses with that group.
Good. So when Brian and Dave first joined us 2.5 years ago, this was your very first project, Lance.
Oh,
yeah. So talk a little bit about this project, because when they were with us, this wasn't finished yet. They had gotten an offer on it, but they were still scrambling to get it all finished, painted, all of that sort of stuff. So kind of start talking through projects with us, if you would.
Okay, project number one was near and dear to my heart, because if you look straight into that picture and a little bit to the right, that's where my house was. And I thought, if we can get a house built there, my house now is going to be worth a lot more money. just selfish. But so it was a lot that I had actually owned once, and it got sold to another person. It used to be a god awful eyesore, and it's right on the main street right up through Ansley. So we thought, it's out of the floodplain. It is close. All of the city utilities were close to it. And it was the perfect place to build, as far as we were concerned. It was going to be let's see if I can use on slab construction. Okay, no basement for this one, but built with a storm shelter inside of it, because Nebraska has this funny thing called tornadoes, and we wanted to have some safety built into this house. So there's a storm shelter built into it, which is actually the master closet for it. So Brian Beaumont was our general contractor. He has been the general manager of all of our projects, and he took this on while running a business full time. He took care of it. He found all the framers, the electricians, the roofers, everything that it takes, and the rest of us just kept our mouths shut. The rest of our investors are kind of like the mother of the groom: wear beige and keep your mouth shut. Okay, so that's how we've run. And Brian has done an excellent job, but we stay out of his way because he knows the business. He's the one that draws up the plans for the building, for the house. We take a look at it and say, Brian, that looks really good. Okay. So this project was available. The lot was available. And as it turned out, project number 2, which is the next slide, actually is a property that lies just to the west of this one. And the gentleman that owned this home passed away, and the same gentleman that owned the lot for the first project owned this lot. So as it turned out, we ended up with 2 lots right next door to each other, although this one had a house on it. Second project had a house on it. But we were lucky to have a member of our investor group who has big equipment and knows how to knock a house down pretty fast and get rid of all of it. And that all sounds easy on the outside, but the truth of the matter is that did take a little organization. So those 2 properties were next to each other. Okay, so challenges were the lot wasn't quite big enough to do quite what we wanted. So then that led to, as far as Lynette, what are we going to call that? Frontage on the lot? Was that what you would call that?
Well, it's both of these, the first 2 houses both sit on Main Street, and the village has 100 foot of right of way. Well, because of where they wanted to place the house on the lot and not have to do a very extensive and expensive long concrete driveway into the homes, we contacted our people that helped with our planning commission and our zoning. And they kind of made a recommendation that the best thing to do would be for the city to vacate 15 feet off of our 100 foot right of way. There's no way that we were ever going to develop all 100 feet of that. And so we vacated 15 feet, which helped them for how they could place the houses on the lots and still have the required side yards and front yards to meet our codes. And so it served a purpose for it met the requirements of the city, and it served a great purpose for them building the houses and placing them on the lots where they wanted, and to hold their costs down.
Because these are about what, 1,500, 1,600 square foot? Is that,
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Right in there. Yeah.
okay, good, thank you. So continue.
Okay, so on the first house, we were really gung-ho investors. So in the sense that when we got close to the end of it, we had a painting party day, so we painted a lot. We did the painting. Brian and Heidi were there 24 hours a day, I think, at the very end, putting all the final touches on it. But we came together, we painted, we hauled off trash. For some of the trash, the building site stuff that didn't get, we tried to help out where we could, but we did get kind of involved with that part. We also painted on house number 2, as I recall. We painted a lot. So we got involved with that part of it. So then the house is now done, and so now you're waiting for the first buyer, right? But God smiled on us, and this couple came and said, they walked in and said, "This is exactly what we're looking for," and they said, "We're going to buy this house." And so that was, and the other good thing about it was they said, "And this investment group that you've got, we kind of like to join that too." So they were.
Yeah, first of all, it's very positive when you sell the first house. It's positive for the group, it's positive for the community, because the feeling always is, oh my gosh, how are you going to sell a $200,000 house in Ansley, America? You're small. And my response to that always is, I don't care where you live. A supply company, whether it's the lumberyard or the person selling you the plumbing or the electrical, they don't say, oh gosh, you're a small community, we're going to give you a cut price. The prices are what the prices are. So, how new housing just costs a certain amount of money, no matter where you're at. So selling the first house is, hugely positive. It's great. And then they're moving on to the second house, and that sold equally quickly, didn't it, Lance? Was it sold fairly quickly after you started, I think two realtors I think it was two realtors were very good in volunteering, like to give a couple of days of free open house, like they provided their services, right?
They did, yes. And so after that open house for the second one, that's when the first offer came in. That realtor worked really hard to help us sell that house. And so it sold. So 2 houses sold in 2 years. We thought we're doing well. So then of course you say, well, we better start house number 3. But so house number so house number 3 is kind of a different. So Brian and Heidi had this really great lot pretty close, and we took a look at it and said, that looks like a good place. It's on the same street. We're kind of like in the same neighborhood. We want to do a basement with this one because this lot will afford the basement. This house is going to be a little bit bigger and a little bit different design. And so we started on the house, and pretty quickly when we got into the house, the eventual buyer came in and said, this is the house I'm really looking for, and this is what else I want to do with this house. Okay, so that house really became kind of a custom built. I mean, it became, not that they're not really all kind of custom built, but this one especially, because we wanted a finished basement with it, which we were not planning on doing, and some extra things added to it to make that project a little bit more expensive. And it was more expensive because it's a completely finished basement, etc. So on this one, I didn't have to paint as much, but I did remember vacuuming some carpet to get ready for our. So house number 3 is now occupied. It's on a really lovely lot. It overlooks that. It faces a little bit different than the other houses do, but it is a lovely home. Challenges: we put a retaining wall in, two walls, which they wanted a front wall for landscaping, and then the back wall was a retaining wall for the property. So it required that.
So I think this was like 100 by 140 lots, so very spacious.
Yes,
it is a spacious lot. It's a really quite nice place. And so they finally, it got all finished up this fall because they finally logged the sod. You can't see the sod that's there now because the snow covered it up before I got a picture taken. But so it's a very lovely home. Yeah.
So Lance or Lynette, you kind of referenced you had negative reactions. There was no way you would ever sell a home for $200,000 in Ansley. And then I had to call Lynette and confirm the sales price on this one. What did the community start to buy in, or what did you encounter with these prices?
Well, like I said, housing is just more expensive overall everywhere. And so when and before you were looking at a couple of vacant lots and then one with a house that just was not rehabable, just could not rehab, it could not be rehabilitated. And so to just have taxes on lots that were nothing and then move to this, it's obviously very positive for the city. And people, I always say, it's all it takes is the right buyer. I might think it's too expensive, and the next guy was like, that's just what I'm looking for, and I have the money, or I feel like I can afford it. So never underestimate the power of potential buyers, because it just takes the right person. And we've been very fortunate. I mean, where all three of these houses were built, utilities were very accessible, very close. And the city, for their part, has tried to help with, not charging them maybe sewer hookup fees. And, they've got to get to our mains, but our mains have been very accessible for sewer and water. And so that's helpful when they build in those areas. And then, like Lance alluded to earlier, being out of the flood zone is huge for Ansley, because then people looking at the homes and looking to purchase them know that flood insurance is not going to be an issue. And so that's very helpful. And you can obviously, I mean, the difference to the city in the property taxes is huge, but it also provides an increase in the base of what we're collecting for sales tax. And, so all those revenues into the city help us to be able to continue to improve infrastructure.
Good. Because just with these three houses, my rough math tells me about $15,000 in added property tax increase to all the taxing entities. So just replicating that over and over. Wow.
Right. It's really substantial.
Yeah. Good. Okay.
So, and this would be a good time to say that, and I forgot all this, but while you talk, I think, but it is really good. When we started with this, it was good to have a good bank. We have a good bank in Ansley, a good financial institution that you can work with. And also, it is good to have a good relationship with your village authorities, okay? Because this is not, you cannot just go out and do this on your own. It's going to take a cooperative effort, and I'm appreciative of the fact that our village board is very they look forward and they want the community to continue to grow, and they're limited too. I mean, there's finite resources everywhere. I mean, there's only so much money to do some things, and so it's important that you have those good relationships. And I'm pleased that up through all of this, we've had good relationships, and when we've asked something of the village, they've considered it and helped us out with our projects. And the same thing with the bank. They've been very, very supportive of us as well. Yeah. And back to, on the design of the first houses, when we first started talking about what do you want to build for houses, our first thought was we wanted to make these accessible all one level, okay? So that if we could convince older people to might move out of a bigger, older home into one of our homes, this was going to be very handicapped accessible, very easy for them to mobile around in, okay? That would open up an older home, a bigger home, family might choose that. And I'm not so sure how that's worked out so perfectly, but that was the idea. So the first two, that's why they were slab. And the second one, I forgot to tell you, that also has a storm shelter in as well. And of course the next two have basements, so that helps out with that. But so those are a couple of things I just thought of while we were talking that were important.
But it has brought new people to the community, correct?
Yes.
Yes, it has. Yes, it has.
Yeah.
It has.
Good.
And yeah, that's been great. Yeah. So project number 4 is just up the hill from project number 3. We seem to have this Belmont Keene kind of idea, which is great. This is very close to our school. this was again a challenge. There's some challenges with this one. There's quite a retaining wall in the back, but I love it. It has a beautiful backyard. It's going to be a beautiful backyard in this house, and it's split level, a little bit different design than we've had before. We had a meeting when we sold house number 3 of all the investors were together because none of us had really been inside to see how that all turned out. And so there were some suggestions about what we might do with house number 4 about configuration, try this, try that. Brian worked that all into the design of this new one. Since this picture was taken, it's now the roof is on, the windows are in. It's come along pretty quickly. I'm hoping that its completion date will probably, Brian's there someplace. I'm thinking maybe early to late summer this fall. That would be great because, as I shared with Lori, we're in the middle of probably looking for a new principal in our school, and it would be really great if we, because he could literally roll out of bed and be at school in 2 minutes. Okay, so it would be really good if we could, we have something to show, a new property to show someone who might consider coming to our school district. So yeah.
So this is probably 3-bedroom, 2-bath, or what does it offer, Lance?
Yes, that. You said it. And downstairs, I don't really know the configuration of this house. Brian, I don't know, can Brian talk? I mean, can he tell you? Because he if he's online, he could tell you quickly but I'm pretty sure that's exactly right. Yeah. They're all open concepts. So it's like living room, dining room, kitchen. That's all a big open area. Then the bedrooms are off from that. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
I think this one's a little bit larger, or with the potential for somebody to finish the basement, maybe a little bit more for family.
Yes.
You would have a little bit more room for kids.
Right. That's the idea. Yep.
Yeah.
And there is a garage component in that lower level.
Yeah, the garage is down below. Yeah, it is.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Good. Good. Yeah, this is exciting. So
Lori, Brian is unmuted, so I think he
Okay.
has something to tell us.
Perfect. Brian? Maybe he left. I don't see him.
Okay.
Brian, do you have anything to add at this point? Maybe.
I see there's a question. Lance, do you know maybe what the anticipated sale prices of this house is, or has that discussion happened yet?
That discussion has not happened yet. I
Okay.
mean, I've not been a part of it. Yeah. So no.
Okay, so maybe while we're taking a quick break here, do you anticipate paying any dividends out to the investors in the future, Lance?
Well, we could have a couple of times, but everybody said, no, do we need to? And by not doing that, that's allowed us to go ahead and purchase some properties where we want to continue to build. Okay. Because so nobody's taken the dividend. I mean, it was kind of like that in fact, when they said that, I remember thinking to myself, really, we could have a dividend. That's kind of good to hear, because basically when I put the money in, as I'm pretty sure everybody else did, it was kind of like, yeah, that's there and that's where it's going to stay. And I don't think about it. This is not part of my retirement fund. This is not something to make. The idea was not for us, the 10 investors, to become independently wealthy and live in the Bahamas. The idea was to build homes in Anzac. That was because that was made pretty clear right from the beginning. So, yeah.
Okay. So at the beginning, was it an initial investment? Is it a monthly contribution?
It was an initial investment that you made.
Okay.
We set the amount, and if you wanted, we actually have upped that amount if you want to join now, because we said we took the risk. So now if you want to come in, but so far we just stayed with the original 10. So I'll tell you a little bit about on the left-hand side, this will be the 5th, if God wills it, and 4th house sells. The 5th piece, it looks just like this snowy little meadow with trees at the end of it, but it's where we're going to build a couple of duplexes. We've come to the realization that housing is also kind of short for some of our younger teachers who are single. Maybe they're not really going to jump into a full-sized house, so a couple of duplexes that are, we thought at first maybe we could build 3 duplexes across there, but in talking to Brian, I think he's kind of decided that it would be service best to build a couple of duplexes there on the size of the lot. Again, it's out of the floodplain. I keep saying that, but in Ansley, that is a big deal, as Lynette said. It is close to all the municipal utilities that we need, electric, sewer, and water. It's very close there. The street by it has just been redone, so it's new. It's in a nice section of Ansley, so yeah, it's going to be a really good building project. And besides that, Lori, it's down the hill from where I live again, so it's like, you know, win-win for my neighborhood. But yeah, so it's going to be, yeah. And project number 6, I may be dead by the time this happens, okay, but this is what we call the cul-de-sac project, and this is going to be a much more intricately, this is going to take some time to develop. This will not happen overnight. There's a lot of things that happen. It's a further from, it's electric is, as I talked to my sister Lynette about, electric is not your biggest concern. That gets pretty well connected, but when it comes to sewer and water and running sewer pipes, and this is a ways away from the main line. It was a property that we identified in our planning commission a long time ago when we were doing our comprehensive plan, that this would be a good place to build homes, but it's going to take a lot of infrastructure. And so widen the street, making sure you have the right turn rate, you know, all of that. We talked about how many homes could be built up there. I'm hoping that at least 2, maybe 3. I don't know. Brian may want 6. I don't know. We'll see what can fit there. But that's that hill right by our school. It just really sits up on top of the. It's a beautiful. It is tremendous view from there. I mean, it's the best view in Ansley because you look clear over the Muddy Creek Valley, which doesn't sound very romantic, so we could rename it because Muddy Creek doesn't sound romantic, but it is a gorgeous view from there because you look over the whole valley from there. It's going to be a beautiful building site, but it's going to take a while. That's going to take some real planning between our investment group and the village about affordability, when we can do certain things, when there's money available in the budget to do this. So this is not going to be an immediate one. The 5th site, which I was showing you where the duplexes, that's much more doable, less of a challenge for as far as the infrastructure concerns are. And I think it will be received well. You know, because we were talking about, what's the reaction in the town? I don't know, Lori. I don't have a close ear to that like maybe other people do. I don't. Can I tell you? I'll just be honest with you. I don't care what the reaction is. I'm just happy the house homes sold and we have new people in town, and that was our goal. So the reaction was, I mean, I just sort of shut that all off and go like, the goal of this group was to build homes to improve our community, and if we can sell them, I go like, hot damn, and like Lynette said, a house is a house. It costs you what it's going to cost you. And she was right. You look for the right buyer. The right buyer comes along and says, yeah. And yeah, so that's.
And I don't hear anything negative. I don't hear anything negative at all. I think that maybe at the beginning, surprise might be more the word. People were surprised because, again, it's like, oh my gosh, we can't sell a house for that much in Ansley. But, it's just with the price of everything. I think people are beginning to realize, it's more realistic. And these duplexes would be great potential rental properties. And I see a question popped up, and I think Lance has, I've kind of heard, and Lance could maybe verify this or not, but potentially there is maybe people that would want to buy these and manage them, because I think the investment group is not interested in managing rental properties. They build them to sell, and but somebody might be interested in purchasing them, and then they would run the rental part of them, and that would be very advantageous. We get calls at the city office a lot. Sometimes you think, my gosh, my phone rings every week. What is for sale? What's available in Ansley? Is there anything to sell or rent? And as Lance mentioned earlier, we are a bedroom community. We have some big businesses in Broken Bow. You have Adams Land and Cattle. You have the hospital. You have people that work for the state of Nebraska or in government offices up there. Banking. I mean, we have a lot of people in Ansley that travel to Broken Bow to work, but they like to live in a smaller community. So if we can continue to provide housing, then we can attract those people, and they'll live here, and increases our tax base. And like I said, potential for kids in your school, and the ripple effect is very positive. I'll mention just really quickly on the cul-de-sac, Brian had some great plans, and he brought him to a board meeting, and we took some long, hard looks there. But yeah, the depth of the sewer that we would have to do to get to that location, the road that we would have to build, the drainage that we would have to provide. This location sits at the top of Ansley, right off of Highway 183. So you've got the state of Nebraska a little bit there potentially to deal with when you're working with drainage. So that one is going to be one to study for probably the long term. And then, if you're going to have a roundabout in there, which they kind of wanted to do, then you got to have the spacing for all kinds of emergency vehicles and fire trucks to be able to maneuver. And there's a lot that would go into developing that area. There's a lot of dirt work that's going to have to happen. And so great spot for maybe a ways down the road.
Okay, good. So tell me, if you would, Lynette, what has the investment group meant to the community? You've touched on all the housing, but are there some intangibles along with that, or what's it doing in the community?
There's probably a lot of intangibles that, we don't even think about. You take them for granted, but obviously just the potential for growth, for bringing new people to town. That means more utilities. That means the tax base. That means sales tax. That means all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to try and say this really politically correctly, but probably everybody on the webinar today is going to know what I'm talking about. This kind of housing attracts positive residents to your community because it is high quality housing, and people that keep nice yards. They put up flagpoles. Their yards are great, so they're kind of showcase homes, and so and they're filling up vacant lots where there was very little tax dollars coming in, and beautifying them. And so all those are improvements for your community and very positive.
Okay, so Lance, continue if you have more to share about these sites.
Oh gosh, I see one of the things, lessons learned, and so lessons learned. Well, yeah. Like I said before, make sure you have a good relationship with your village board. Make sure you have good bankers behind you, good make sure that the investment group that you're working with, you're all like-minded about what your goal is. So have a goal. And ours was to build homes. Okay, that was the goal. And I know it sounds very simplistic, but I don't think it doesn't have to be anything more than that. We're going to do this, and pick a good person. Like we're very fortunate we have Brian in our lumberyard, because they're good people and they work hard for us and with us, and that's been very important to us. You have to be flexible, because sometimes what you want to do immediately is not going to happen immediately. It's going to take a while, and sometimes it looks like it's an insurmountable problem, but most are not. With a little bit of time and a little bit of thought, like we talked on the cul-de-sac thing, the land came available. So you sit there and you go, like, do we buy it? Do we not buy it? Do we buy it? Do we not buy it? And then you do not want to 10 years from now said, I wish we would have bought that, because we could have gone on, so sometimes you do have to move fast. You move faster maybe than, so being flexible helps. Like-minded people on your investment group. Some of our investment group, their families have long, deep roots in Ansley, and some not. So the investors that you might find to invest in your group might surprise you, because one of our investors actually lives 20 miles south of Ansley. Okay, so that was probably my most surprised investors, because I thought, wow, and the connection back to community, since I know all these people for all these years, I'm going like, wow, that is quite the connection. I would have never quite. So you don't ever want to look away from someone. You don't ever say, ooh, I don't think they might invest in this. Okay. Yeah, because you will get surprised. You do get surprised. And I don't know, is there a question that somebody's got? Because I keep blabbing. I mean, is there some question that we could, so like, what would you want to know? Because it wasn't anything very magical, and that was right about the agreement. I kind of forgot about that, but that is sort of hugely important that you have that agreement and you
Yeah.
get the people. And but we didn't do anything elaborate. Okay, there was no ceremony, no sacrificing of children or anything at Lake Ansley. There wasn't anything big about it. We just all came together and said, look, we need to do something, and it's our turn to do it. Because those people back in 1916 with that stupid, crazy little push that's Ansley, they said, we are tired of these old buildings that we drug in from these two towns. We're going to do something. And it was a great time to do it, actually, because the town was growing. We weren't growing so much, but if we want to keep our town, somebody had to do something. So we said we could do this. We think we can do this. And we've been lucky so far to have had some success. And I honestly, I have this little statue of St. Joseph, and I go buried in the backyard, and I just leave it there until we sell the new house, and then I dig him up and I move him to the next one. So if you need a St. Joseph statue, I've got a couple. I'll loan you. They come in handy, okay? And it just, I don't know, but it
Well,
really,
don't be afraid to start.
No,
Don't be afraid to start. And then, like Lance said, I think like-minded people, so you're on the same page. It's very important. I think their agreement was hugely important so that everybody's expectations, the expectations of the group, if you come into it, you have to agree to this. So there's no fussing. There's no, that's not what I thought was going to happen. I expected to get my money back. And maybe there would be another community that would want to pay dividends. So whatever you decide works for your community, you can make it work with the right agreement and like-minded people and a goal, a very simple goal. I think those are probably some of the basic things to start with. And then you can find the properties typically and then move forward.
I liked your comment speaking about building the duplexes maybe to meet teacher needs.
Right.
We hear over and over when a school or a community hires a new teacher, if they can't find housing and have to live in another community, chances are in 2 to 3 years, they've left your school system and found a job in the community where they live. And so having those duplexes and having them so close to the school will be just phenomenal for that part of the community, if that's the route that you go or the future owners take with duplexes to meet the needs of those young teachers that are coming to the community.
Right.
So, yeah. So what questions do you have for our speakers today?
Gosh, you just explained everything so well. No questions, huh?
obviously these are not people who are in my first grade class, okay? Because I get lots of questions.
Well,
Okay.
I remember very early on a conversation with Brian when he was first proposing this idea. And part of the beauty of a group like this is, and I know what everybody says, oh, there's grant money out there, they're going to give it away, we just will take advantage of it. And a lot of times that's true. But along with that, a lot of times comes a lot of red tape. And I remember Brian saying, if we do this ourselves, we can do what we want and avoid a lot of the red tape and a lot of the requirements and some of the restrictions. And so that is also the beauty of this type of a group. If you can get one going in your community or in your area, that you can make some progress and make an impact in your community by your own rules, if you will.
Okay. We do have a couple questions from Amanda. She wants to know what the vacancy rate in Ansley is. And then do you anticipate continuing with new construction for the future? Or do you ever see rehabilitation work in the investment club's future?
The vacancy rate is higher than what we would hope. I guess I can't give you a number, but the city recently applied for some grant funding to try and acquire vacant, abandoned buildings that are not in good shape and not able to be rehabilitated. If we can get that grant money, this type of a grant would help us clean those lots up, get rid of those properties, take care of anything that was hazardous. And then our investment group would be, if there's not private individuals that want to come in and buy, our investment group would be somebody that the community will work with very closely, very positively to not give them that, I don't know, because I'm not on the board, I don't get to vote on that stuff, but making those lots available very reasonably, so that they can continue with their building.
Okay.
And yes, I think for the near future, building will be our main focus. We've talked a little bit about rehabilitation, but there's never been a great warmth to that from the investors group. But I think there's a couple members individually that are in that group that take a look at that and go like, that might be a challenge I might want to take on my own. Okay, but I don't look for our group to do that. I think construction will be where, and what type of construction we go in, I mean, that might change. I mean, like the duplexes will be a new move for us. I mean, because we were thinking single family, but now the duplex, that's a little bit different idea for us. But this particular location is perfect for that. And we also see the need for that now too. So yeah.
You mentioned some of the investors might do rehab on, apart from the club or the group itself. Are there other individuals in the community doing any rehab of existing structures?
We have had that. Yeah, we have had that. Yes, we have. But then at some point, sometime, I know that you either have the houses that are really beyond rehabilitation, or we've had several that have been rehabilitated and are being rented or have been purchased. And so that's very positive too. And I think it's also possible, in someone's community that depending upon your group, you may have a group that says, we have the right kind of people that want to invest and that also have the skills, whether they be carpentry, electrical, plumbing, or whatever, where we think we could make this work by simply doing rehabilitation. So, a group like that could be formed, and you're still improving your housing for your community. It may not be new, but if it's rehabilitated and you can rent it and or sell it, then you have that seed money to move on to the next project. So there's no, this was the plan for our group, and it's worked great, and they are continuing, but I don't see any reason why another group couldn't, go down a little bit different path and accomplish the same thing by improving housing.
Good. Do you remember when the last spec home was built in Ansley before these?
I think Sharon told me 1978.
I think you might be close. Yes.
And I did not remember her parents living there, but I did remember who built it. And that's a long time.
That's a long dry spell for a
Yes,
community.
it is.
So, well, I know what the investment club is doing is just the buzz of the community. Just when it was initially formed and the first house was built, and now the momentum that you have created in town, it is all the talk about. People can't wait to see what comes next. So good. So
there's a lot of drive-bys. There's a lot of drive-bys when houses are under construction.
Yeah, no doubt. Lance, maybe this is a question you can't answer, but would the investment group be willing to share any documents with individuals or?
I don't think that would be a problem. I mean, there's not anything sacred about, I don't think. I'd have to talk to a couple of people in our group. But I don't remember that. No, Moses did not bring this down from Mount Sinai with it. Yeah, no, I think it's a fairly,
okay.
I think we would be, if anybody's willing to do anything in any community, I think we would be willing to help out, anyway, if you want us to come and talk, if you want us to come and bring or share, we've done that in a couple of communities, 2 or 3, I think have asked us to come. I've done one besides this, and yeah, they just wanted to know and pick our minds, and that's what you need to know. So like, what really happens, and so I don't think that would be a problem.
Yeah, it's not necessarily proprietary, but sometimes what's really, really helpful is just maybe outlining or highlighting or pointing out some of the terms that you need to cover. these are some points to think about. These are some points to make sure you get in a, like a bylaws or whatever you want to call it. You want to do the best job you can from the get-go, so that it's very clear for everybody, and you don't have any, you really lessen your odds for misunderstandings, or you don't want to upset that balance of your group. So.
Right. So good. So are there any other questions for our speakers? Well, if not, we'll wrap up the webinar. We have put their contact information back on the screen for you, and I encourage you to reach out to them. I'm sure that they would welcome your questions. We often have a saying here at SCED that activity breeds activity. And so what they're doing in Ansley can be possibly something that will encourage investment groups to start in your community or activities to begin. So we greatly appreciate that. Today's webinar will be made available on our HomeNE website. The website address is there, and you can search using Ansley or maybe a word that you heard today. We try to capture hashtags and put those on the website. So in the coming days, that will be made available to you. So, and then our next webinar is 1 month from today on March 16th, and we're going to be visiting another small community. A few months ago, we asked for story ideas, and the community of Blue Springs was mentioned to us. So we are going to be joined by Rex Adams from One Property at a Time in Blue Springs, talking about what they're doing in their community of population. I think he said 380 the other day when I talked to him. So they're doing some equally wonderful things to turn their community around. So Lynette and Lance, once again, I greatly appreciate the time you've given us today and the stories that you've shared, and just it has thrilled me to hear what's going on in the community, and we look forward to hearing maybe future updates from you again.
Okay. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you.
Have a great day.
All right.
Yes.